Hey, so moving into the last part of the workshop now, and so we've got one last presentation from Emine. So,
Hi, Damien. Yes,
uh,
I'm here. Um, can I just share my screen and use my slides if that's
yeah,
okay? Can you all see my screen now?
yeah,
Great. Hi, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity, Damien, to talk about our chapter together with which I wrote with Shiva. Unfortunately, she can't be here. She's based in the US and she has some teaching to do. Therefore, I will be talking on behalf of both of us. And I'm thinking maybe it won't even take half an hour. Let's see. So our chapter was about autistic self-advocacy and trying to understand the complexities of autistic self-advocacy. Just to give a quick disclosure, I am a researcher myself, a senior lecturer at University of Portsmouth, and I do autism research applying both participatory and mixed methods. Participatory approach, working with the community. I'm also the exec member of the Center for Interaction, Development and Diversity here at my own university. And Shiva is an associate professor, also researcher. We are both academics, so it was very refreshing to hear from like a professionals earlier. She's also a speech and language therapist, and she also has her own lab about communication and diversity. So first of all, I think everybody knows what self-advocacy is. By the way, I can't see the chat or other people, so if you have any question, I'm sorry, I will have a look at the end because of my slide presentation, I can't see. So self-advocacy, as you probably already all know, is the ability to explain your needs, preferences, boundaries, and ways of communicating so that people understand how we interact and respect that. And it is not only about explaining what you need, but also what you don't want, what you're against, or what it is not your style. And unfortunately, it mostly relies on verbal communication. But autistic community also respects other ways of showing what you need with your behavior, for example, or using some kind of tools to communicate that kind of needs. And for autistic people, self-advocacy mostly means like explaining their sensory needs, interaction styles, and what they like, what they don't like, what helps them in a conversation, what hurts them in a conversation. And recently, there has been a lot of research on self-advocacy, and we hear it a lot that it's an important skill for not only autistic people, but for all disabled people to obtain because it helps them it empowers them to actively participate in decisions that affect their life, as well as communicating their needs, preferences. Therefore, it includes or it leads to inclusion. So there was a lot of intervention. There's been a lot of intervention recently trying to kind of teach that skill to autistic people. In our chapter, we talked about self-advocacy because we thought one way to reduce the double empathy gap or problem was actually advocating. So if autistic people tell us more about what they need, their preferences, their communication styles, therefore that would lead to less misunderstanding in that dyadic interactions. So it's almost like a response to double empathy theory, self-advocacy. That said, self-advocacy also helps with like reducing stigma towards autistic people or increasing understanding and awareness of their needs. So it has a bigger agenda as well. So we thought it has a direct relationship with double empathy problem. Then we started in our chapter talking about, okay, self-advocacy is important to empower autistic people. It is mostly recently targeted in interventions to kind of teach that skill. It might help to reduce stigma. It might help to reduce those misunderstandings. So it might help to reduce the double empathy problem. However, when we started looking further into interventions, we realized that it's not much different than the medical model-based interventions in a way that instead of teaching in the past, you would teach the social skills, let's say, to autistic people. Now we are teaching them how to advocate for themselves, which means, again, the target or the burden is again on the autistic person. So instead of redistributing that responsibility among the whole society, we are again doing what earlier interventions did. So we are kind of targeting the autistic person. We are assuming the autistic person will learn that skill, which is, by the way, very complicated. And it requires a lot of personal skills as well. So, and most of those interventions to boost self-advocacy, it's not designed by autistic people. So it's mostly designed by professionals or parents or researchers themselves, which means, or which may not actually address the barriers to advocacy. So they are a bit reductionist just to teach that skill, but how does it actually look like, or what does it mean for autistic people? So we try to, in our chapter, we try to show that as a case that the weight of advocacy unfortunately still falls on the autistic person themselves. And what does that mean and why that's the case? Then we started talking about the costs of advocating for yourself or for the community you represent. First of all, the first thing that is the first rule in self-advocacy is to be aware of your needs. That may not be the case for a lot of autistic people. I work with autistic students at university. Most of the time, they may not even know what they need at the beginning in this new context. They might know what they need at home, but like university campus is a completely different place, so they may not even know what they need. And then secondly, the moment you start talking about your needs, it comes with a label, it comes with a diagnosis. So you're actually putting yourself at risk for exclusion, for bullying, for discrimination. So a lot of people may not want to. If they don't want to disclose, they will also not advocate for themselves and for their needs because they go hand in hand. And yeah, it puts a risk on the person and it makes them vulnerable to discrimination. And the other thing, when we were writing the chapter, we were thinking a lot of people who advocate, the other cause is the economic barriers. It requires time, it requires a lot of knowledge, and not every autistic person might have those resources. And a lot of advocates, as we know, they do it for free. It's an unpaid position. They do it for the community or for themselves, but most of the time, uh, they use their own resources without any incentives. And not, like I said, not everybody also has access to services to even communicate their needs because of economic barriers. Um, the next thing we talked about is the cultural disparities. As both authors in this chapter, we are not from a Western culture. And when we were discussing the concept of self-advocacy, we realized that it's a very Western concept. It relies on that individualistic, independent skills that may not be appreciated in a lot of non-Western cultures. I see a lot of chat coming, so I will I don't know whether it's about this, but maybe I will look later. Um, it's quite like, yeah, actually disturbing to follow my talk. So yes, it's the self-advocacy itself is quite a Western concept, and it may not be very easily adapted in non-Western cultures where uh, it is not very popular to communicate your own needs. It's the needs of the society, needs of the group you belong to. So it's almost like looked down on, constantly talking about your needs or like your individual skills. So we thought we also need more research in terms of how self-advocacy is taught to people who are not from Western cultures, let alone intersectionalities. We know we also discussed today a lot of people from racial, ethnic minorities, they also have other barriers to healthcare. So they might even feel more disencouraged to communicate their needs to a culture which is to a healthcare system which is very westernized. Um, and then all of those different barriers and complexities lead us to advocacy fatigue as a term. This term has been used before in disability studies, but not in relation to self-advocacy fatigue in autism. But from a lot of people we work with, we hear a lot how exhausting it is to talk about your needs to different people constantly, being directed, referred to someone, and sometimes to explain your needs. First of all, like if they're not validated by the professionals or other people or your peers, your parents, you constantly have to kind of justify your need. And this is exhausting. And sometimes it might mean the person has to talk about their trauma to explain their needs. So it might be re-traumatizing to even discuss it, to communicate it. So we talked about advocacy fatigue and as a cost of being an advocate. Um, and the other issue we talked about, advocacy is not done only by autistic people themselves. For example, if you have an autism diagnosis earlier in life, your parents are probably the first people who will advocate for you. And depending on whether they're neurodivergent or not, they may not fully reflect your needs, or their language might be medicalizing itself. So that control of parents' advocacy is an issue, especially if they're not neurodivergent themselves. And same with non-autistic professionals, even though they have the best intentions, they are the gatekeepers to this accessible communication. And sometimes they may not respect or understand the need of the autistic person. So therefore they can miscommunicate, especially for like minimally or non-speaking autistic people. That's even a bigger issue because um, if the self-advocacy or the advocacy for other people relies on verbal communication. Um, so we talked about that external control over advocacy by parents and professionals and how to mitigate those those responses. And overall, we thought in our chapter that we need more work or we need to work on that concept of self-advocacy fatigue and how to reduce that and how to take that burden from the autistic person, especially thinking about all the barriers and the costs of self-advocacy. And the research should not just focus on interventions to boost self-advocacy, which is important, but also understanding the whole picture and what might be the barriers to advocate for yourself in your environment and therefore address those barriers to actually make that happen. We also don't know what is the successful what is a successful outcome of self-advocacy. We know there's literature showing that it leads to better quality of life, but it is not fully understood based on other barriers or how it can be done or how is it useful for some and not for others. So overall, we try to conclude with some suggestions to do in the future. First of all, allyship. That burden on the autistic person to advocate for themselves should be redistributed. And allyship is really important to share that burden and commit to the same cause, which is like improving understanding of autistic people and their rights and creating accessible environments for them where they don't have to constantly report their needs. Also, when we were writing this chapter, we realized there's not any empirical work on it. There are some blogs by autistic people talking about the advocacy fatigue, but nobody actually empirically looked into that, especially its consequences, and that includes non-speaking autistic people. Um, and then, like any other topic in autism, we need to understand more about the intersectionality. It is not just white autistic men, but there's a lot of diversity within autistic being and autistic living. Therefore, we need to understand those different intersectionalities or intersecting identities. And in any research that we might do or any further intervention to teach self-advocacy skill, we need more co-production. We need to bring the autistic people's voices to the very upfront of what the research should be about and how it should be done. Anything that matters, autistic people should be co-produced with the input of autistic people. I think that's all I want to say. It's a very quick summary of the chapter, and we talked about a lot of things in more detail. But me and Shiva, we would like to continue this work and start maybe looking into those experiences by autistic people, self-advocacy. So if you have any ideas, any expertise, any experiences yourself, feel free to write to us. I put both of our emails here. And I'm happy to take some of those questions now if I can stop sharing.
Thank
Yes,
you.
now I can see the
And you can
whole
see
chat. Sorry, I couldn't see anything, and I could see like going up, and I'm like, I don't know, is it about something I said? But yes,
it's
I'm happy to
impossible to
take
see, isn't
questions.
it, when you're sharing
Exactly.
screen?
It was possible before. I don't know why it's not possible on Zoom anymore. But
Don't
yeah.
worry. Jill has her hand up, so go straight to Jill.
Thanks so much for that. I really enjoyed and appreciated listening to you, and what you described resonated with my experience. So just a couple of questions, reflections. So one is, as I was hearing you, I was thinking, in how many areas of my life does this apply to? Like, I went to the dentist this afternoon, right? Tick, work. But not like, it isn't even work singular. It's like, and then I have an interaction with this organization, and I have an interaction with it, and then I have this contract, and and then I have a visit, or that, like, it isn't a once and done thing. It's a continuous and exhausting, um uh and dynamic thing, and it isn't singular. Like, my needs in an online space would be different to my needs in a meeting, would be different to my needs if I had to travel to London versus having to drive, and like, just how, like, the exhaustion of the variety and all of the different spaces in my life where this shows up. So that was a kind of a personal thought, and the disclosure of vulnerability, the challenge of that, but also, like, um often for me, it is something like that. Vulnerability takes it takes courage, because the price of it can be really high. Like, it could be met in a beautiful way, and I could be seen and recognized and supported, or that isn't always my experience. Like, or it could be met, like, with harshness and retribution, and so, yeah, like, I really appreciated the speaking to vulnerability, but also, um like, even within that, like, there is a richness to that. I think that I would be really interested to hear more on. Um, anyway, sorry. So the second thing I wanted to reflect on was, um, like, this spoke to, uh, self-advocacy, but I'm really interested in, like, the role of peer advocacy, and thinking about, like, our work in Neurodiverse Connection as a community interest company. Like, part of what we're trying to do is to have these conversations, to raise this awareness, to support systems change, to have some of these conversations, to lay some of the foundations, the groundwork. To, like, I don't imagine that it wouldn't mean that people don't also need to have their conversations, but like some of the work has been done, some of the ground has been prepared, like it becomes easier or more possible, or there's more awareness or more opportunity, or people might be met differently. So I was just curious if you have considered or explored the role of like peer advocacy and um or like more systemic or organizational change and how that might support and enable self-advocacy. And then finally also if there was any connect, like I think part of what makes the peer advocacy and the system change more possible is actually spaces like this where there is connection, identification, joining up. Like how important is that in self-advocacy? Is that actually sometimes it is a one person self, but often it is a self as part of a network, a community, an organization. Sorry, that was a lot.
No,
Interested for
that's
any of your
really,
thoughts
really,
about that.
yeah, no, that's really helpful and great comments, Jill. Thank you. Um, Given the time, I won't comment on the two reflections you have had, but I definitely agree. It's not one-off thing. You do it and that's it. You meet new people, you move to new places, you start a new job. It's constant. I think that's this cumulative experience as well that makes it very exhausting and it comes with a cost maybe later. Yes, vulnerability of disclosure, again, we talked about it, which means every time you report your needs, even in very inclusive spaces, you can see that you come across as a nuance, like, oh, one more thing to do. I see that even with colleagues teaching, like using universal design, there's just, oh, one more thing to do because that's like, you can see like, even if it is not very explicit, there's that thing in the room that makes me feel so uncomfortable. So I definitely agree with what you said. And about peer advocacy, I think there are organizations like that in the UK, which we also discussed in the chapter, and I think that systematic, organized advocacy is really important instead of all this like day-to-day one person action. Um, I think there is more awareness of this and there's more funding for those, but I just like I have some advocate friends. Uh, like it is a lot of time and effort, which comes again, like they do that constantly. They have their job, they go home and they do this. Like if that is not their main thing, that group. So that's why I wanted to talk about like they will do it because they know it will lead to something good, but it is literally they don't have a break if that is not their main thing. So there is more, and I think it's really important. My point, our point in the chapter, peer advocacy is really important, but like you don't even have to be just autistic to be an advocate. That's why I want to talk about allyship because we know the majority is still non-autistic, and there is more. I think advocacy should not be taught to autistic people. It should be taught to non-autistic people to advocate for their peers, for their friends, for their kids. So that's why we were trying to say it's really important, but I think it should extend beyond the autistic community. Very quick answer. Yes, I agree. Thank you.
There's a couple of links in the chat. I put up one earlier, which was a blog by Mel Baggs on self-advocacy, which for me is a bit of a classic one, where they talk about non-speaking and less verbal autistics and things, and how saying no or refusing something is advocating for oneself, and things like that. It's a really nice blog on that kind of topic. And there was a link posted up to a paper I wasn't aware of, but it looks really interesting, on epistemic exploitation. I've forgotten the name. It's somewhere in the chat anyway.
Oh, yes.
And having a quick look at the paper, it reminded me of Jim Sinclair and the self-narrating zoo exhibit, where you're expected to divulge all this personal information, but this paper seems to take that a step further and sort of teaching the oppressor and stuff it had in the abstract. So yeah, that I'm gonna be reading that later, I think, when I get the time.
Yes, me too. Thank you for sharing.
I think there's any
There
questions.
was a hand. Did I say a hand up earlier? It might have been a hand up by mistake. Maria, yeah, that's it. Yeah, thank you.
You. Yeah, I wasn't sure if we had time or not. Thank you so much for the presentation. I think it got me thinking about the burden, the self-advocacy burden and how it's impacted if people have experienced trauma growing up. Because I'm working with somebody at the moment who's autistic and
Mhm.
has a health condition, and I'm supporting them to advocate for themselves in medical appointments. However, I've
Mm.
also recently started to work with the system because I've kind of recognized as well. I was thinking, gosh, I'm putting the burden on the person to become more
Mm.
assertive when they've had a lot of neglect. So it's not been modeled for them to kind of identify or know what their needs are or voice their needs. So it's not been safe. And then, the power imbalance that's inherent in medical relationships and how that also plays a part in the person being able to actually self-advocate. So yeah, what we're doing at the moment. So I'm really pleased that, yeah, I've attended this workshop because it's really made me more aware, I suppose, of the imbalance and the injustice, I suppose, that comes with self-advocacy. So what we're doing at the moment, we're liaising at trust level, essentially to try and support and change how we approach, I suppose, certain appointments or even alerts that we put on the system, which can be so unhelpful sometimes. This person has an alert autism/learning disability, which always, made me kind of quite cross. So I'm liaising a trust level with people to try and, change that. But I suppose what you're saying is that that's not common practice, and this is where the frustration can come a lot of the time, can't it? It's not common practice. We still put that burden on people. So I'll be reading your chapter and looking to kind of I suppose explore other steps, that we can change the system. So yeah, thank you.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you for your comment. Very quickly, yes, like I said, there is no bad intention in a lot of research trying to teach advocating self-advocacy to autistic people. But when you look at like all these three model levels, awareness, lead, it requires a lot of skills that is difficult no matter what. And on top of that, you're putting people in situations that they may have a trauma with. So it's not just like teaching them as a skill, you do it like you work on the whole concept. You're not is very much loaded with sensitive information. That's why for some people it's reliving the trauma, trying to advocate for themselves. That's why they might actually completely avoid it. But if they do that, and if that's the only way to get their service, that creates further problem. Of course, they can't access the service if they choose not to, or they can get ineffective services. So there's a whole cycle of that. And that's what we were trying to say. It is important advocating self-determination, but it should be redistributed. It shouldn't be. So it's great what you're doing with your patient, but more awareness among professionals. And maybe with my students, most of the time I offer like, can I advocate for you to the disability services? Because it's so much work writing those emails, knowing what they need, and it's one more thing to do. It might be so. That's why we need to take up some of the burden and do it all together, and not just leave it to the person, which might be really re-traumatizing. Maybe one final question from the chat. Oh,
It's great,
Amy.
mate.
Let me take down the hand. I'll be quick. This is from a personal perspective. I often now, as identifying neurodivergent, would explain I'm neurodivergent. So if I'm talking with big institutions or organizations, and currently or recently in the past 6 months, I had to have an elongated conversation with a very well-known, very powerful UK institution that everybody from the UK has to deal with, or the majority of people has to deal with. And I was advocating for myself and saying some of the systems they had in place weren't helpful and they really could do with a few changes. And it was used against me. It was weaponized because the mistakes they made, and there were many, it's now gone past a formal complaint and gone to an independent inquiry. Uh, the mistakes made has now been, oh, this has been because we weren't trained with neurodivergent, which they were, because they actually acknowledged they were trained working that. And I felt gaslit because it was saying, oh, and I just think that's a problem that I'm guessing. What about I'm comfortable taking on big institutions. I've done it all my life. I can have these difficult conversations. No problem. Bring it on. But what about those who can't?
Yeah, definitely. It's a very important point. It requires a lot of resources to do that, and that's why I was thinking we only talked about disclosure vulnerability, but it's vulnerability in every possible way. The moment you disclose your need or advocate for yourself, you don't know whether it will be perceived very positively or it will be used against you, like in your case, or you will lose some rights. Some people choose not to because they are afraid they will lose what they already have by asking more or wanting more. So it's a complete constant kind of battle. Should I or not? What will I get? What will I lose? And that itself is exhausting. And I agree, not everybody has the resource. And even if you do, and you take on and you advocate for yourself, you still have another bad experience, which will probably impact how you react next time. So it's all this kind of constant daily kind of rejections you experience as well. It builds up. So you say you could do it, great, but like it's not just that, it comes with a cost. Next time you do it, you know what happened last time, and you're already going into the same or different communication with that, you know, negative feeling. So yeah, it's very vulnerable situation. That's the other thing we don't talk much about when we talk about advocacy, which we would like to look more into in our research next. Thank you. Thank you, Amy. There's so much in the chat, but I don't know whether we have time to go through them.
We can leave the chat open for a few minutes, I guess. I might need to go and collect my shopping that's being delivered soon. But I think it's been a really good discussion though, because I mean these issues around advocacy come up a lot, and it's and what can be done on a collective basis is very important, I think, and relates to what Jill and Kay were talking about earlier as well. And I guess there is more system-oriented work and ongoing work. So things like the National Autistic Task Force Guide, the organisation Jill and Kay and that, NDTI, connect. There's At Autism Synergy Program. All of these sort of things are trying to get system-wide change and ongoing reflection and change, because it's what's just not adequate about sort of training programs like the Oliver McGowan mandatory training, which is being rolled out everywhere. It's difficult to know what impact that's going to have or how positive or not it may be, because one-off training is done and dusted and stuck in the shelf type of thing tends not to have that more sort of embedded impact over time. And I think to get that shift and change within an organizational culture takes a more kind of ongoing engagement. It's not a one-off package or deal. And so that's been coming up a lot in what people have been saying. And so, yeah, I mean, lots of food for thought with all the talks tonight, as ever. um, so, yeah, we'll be having another workshop in 2 weeks' time. I think, yeah, we've got double empathy problem and spiritual abuse, one presentation. Sarah Douglas, universal design, and social communication and the double empathy problem. So we've got a kind of quite an eclectic range for the next workshop in a couple of weeks. And given the interest, we'll probably hold one or two in the new year as well. So, although we haven't organised dates and stuff for that yet. So, just to let you know, there's a fourth workshop coming up on the 15th. So that will be up on the website soon.
It will. And the videos, recordings from tonight will be up on the Park YouTube channel, hopefully sort of towards the end of the week, and we'll notify you again through Park that they're there. So.
Thanks for everyone for coming, and thanks to all our presenters.
Yeah, thank you to presenters for sparking some really interesting discussion. So thank you, and thanks for everyone's comments.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.